Welcome to Crucial Dialogue, hosted by Reverend Roger Gambrell and Reverend Clinton Thomas, where we discuss pivotal and controversial issues for those that need nurturing and clarity in the faith. Converse with us. Ask any question you want. Meet us online and join the dialogue. This is Crucial Dialogue.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Crucial Dialogue, where we discuss controversial and pivotal issues that need clarity in the faith. I am your co-host, Reverend Clinton Thomas, and joining me on tonight, we're privileged to have Deacon Andy Jackson and Reverend Roger Gambrell. Roger Gambrell, how you doing on tonight? The dialogue is about to be crucial in just a moment. We're having some technical challenges right now. Andy, can you hear me fine?
Yes, I can hear you. How's it going?
I'm all right. How's the family?
Oh, everybody's good down here. Just ready to get this crucial dialogue on.
All right, that's what I'm talking about. Well, hey, while we get Roger Gambrell connected, we're privileged to have with us Dr. Charles Willis. Dr. Charles Willis is going to help us with a healthy, crucial dialogue, a healthy discussion about the blunt truth about marijuana. Dr. Willis, how you doing today?
Good evening. Quite well, Reverend Thomas. Deacon Jackson,
Glad,
Reverend Gambrell. How
glad
are you gentlemen?
Doing good.
we're doing fine. Glad to have you on tonight. So, our discussion being blunt about marijuana. I just want
Sure.
to know, from a clinical standpoint, if I could put it like that, is let me ask this question: is
Sure.
marijuana unhealthy? Let's just be blunt about that first. Is marijuana unhealthy?
Define unhealthy. It depends upon your definition of unhealthy. Anything to excess is unhealthy. So it depends upon how you're defining health and unhealthy. So there are some benefits in certain studies that indicate that a significant part of the population can definitely benefit. But again, I would have to have a baseline as to what you mean by unhealthy. The conversation that
Well,
I would have with a 22-year-old, 6'2" 195-pound point guard would be a little bit different than the conversation I would have with an 88-year-old great grandmother that's 4'11" and weighs 84 pounds. So it kind of depends upon the context in regards to unhealthy.
okay. Well, growing up as a little boy in the country,
Uh-huh.
my uncles, I saw them with the powerful plant, as we might call it, and they always said it.
Sure.
They always told me it was good for you. So when they told me it was good for me, Dr. Willis, I compared that to greens, carrots, and tomatoes and stuff like that. So that when I say healthy, I mean, so is it? And I know you want more context, but I just so many people are at ease with marijuana more so than they are with some of the other drugs, if I could say it like that. So that's what I was wanting to know. Well, let's just good for you, and if it is, talk about how it is good for you, and if it's not, let's talk about how it's not good for
Well, the first thing I would want to understand is, I guess, a little background first. I'm sorry. Again, Dr. Willis, undergrad in chemistry with a minor in mathematics from Grambling State University. The doctorate was conferred by Texas Southern University in the area of pharmacy. Just a bit of
you.
background.
Okay.
In response to your question, your specific question, the first thing I would want to know is how it was ingested, like the uncles and cousins that you mentioned. My assumption would be that it was inhaled or smoked. Is that correct?
And that's correct. Now, Dr. Willis, I said uncles.
Mhm.
My cousins told me to get out of this, okay?
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. I was trying to get a bit of clarity, but I
Yeah,
was just
my
considering
cousins.
the source. Yeah, so it would kind of depend upon what's going on with them would be my first question. How old are they? What comorbid conditions would they have? Would be two of the questions that I would ask. And 22-year-old basketball player may look a little bit different than a 42-year-old male with health issues, heart related conditions, pain management, things
Okay,
of that nature. So if the guy
okay,
that you're mentioning, if the guys that you're mentioning say they're middle-aged black men with the usual stresses that come along with it, there definitely may have been some relief that they received from inhaling or using the marijuana. I could definitely see some possible benefits that they receive from that. But when we say benefits,
okay,
it may be analogous to the benefits that some people may get from alcohol. Now, alcohol, a
okay.
drink with one person, they could take one drink, one beer, one shot, one mixed drink, and he can fall down sloppy drunk and want to tear up the entire church. Whereas the next fella can drink 10 beers, a six pack, or half a case, and the only thing he needs to do is go to the bathroom. So it kind of depends upon the person, their tolerance level, and the comorbid conditions would be my questions and concerns initially.
Okay, okay. And tell me if you can answer this question for me.
Sure,
Why is it that and this question has a little bit of humor to it, Dr. Willis, so bear
absolutely.
with me. But
Yes,
why
sir.
is it that people that smoke marijuana, nobody that I know,
Of course
why do
not.
they why is it said that marijuana gives you the munchies? Are you able to elaborate on the connection between the effects of marijuana on the body and the desire to eat all of a sudden or to eat more? Is there really a
Absolutely.
connection, or is that just a myth?
There's actually evidence to support that tetrahydrocannabinoid, generally people call it THC, the receptors in the body also activate the same triggers that initiate an appetite. So when people are smoking marijuana and they get the munchies and they want to eat a pack of Oreos, a bag of Doritos, or whatever it is, two or three hot dogs, a hamburger with cheese, let's go up to the street and get something from the corner store as well. Absolutely. There is evidence to support that the active ingredient in marijuana will definitely initiate the munchies. As a matter of fact, the active ingredient has been distilled and is used in a medication for cancer patients.
Oh,
You may or may not be aware, just a bit of background, some cancer patients, of course, lose hair, they lose a lot of weight. So in order, and they lose their
yes, yes.
appetite. So in order to stimulate the appetite in primarily cancer patients, it's actually given to them to actually stimulate the appetite. So your point to the munchies, that's absolutely scientific evidence to support that.
Oh, wow. Thanks for sharing that. That's good information. So, also, let me add this. Those of you that are watching and listening out there in YouTube and Facebook land, you can send in questions for anyone on the panel. Dr. Willis, especially, he's joined us on tonight. And so, if you have questions or comments, you can chat and send them in to us. We'd love to hear from you. Just anything that you want to share, anything you want to know about being blunt about marijuana. All right, we got Deacon Andy Jackson on with us tonight. Deacon Jackson I'm not going to call him a millennial, but he's certainly close to that age group. Deacon Jackson, Deacon Jackson, can you help us to understand people that may be in your age group? Why is this such an attraction to marijuana? Why is hot tea not enough to soothe them? Why do they have to go to marijuana? Can you help us with that?
Well, coming from that millennial age group, growing up in the 90s, in 2000s, early 2000s, we was told that marijuana was a gateway drug. I consider myself a veteran in the front line of the war on drugs that we partaked in this country, and being told that it's a gateway drug, it made certain people think about the stronger drugs that were out there, like crack cocaine or or heroin. But just to listen to the doctor talk about the medical benefits of marijuana, fast forward 20 years later, we realized that it was a gateway drug, but it was a gateway to the criminal justice system that would create
Mhm.
more stress
Absolutely.
problems that would maybe force somebody into partaking into a stronger drug, perhaps like a heroin or cocaine. So I think that if we really looked at the reasoning behind why we look at marijuana as a bad thing in this country, it stems from the systemic burden of trying to make it easier to incarcerate a certain group of people and not be upfront about how the benefits of marijuana allow you to um, relieve some stress sometimes, or help people with anxiety, or a lot of the day-to-day issues that we deal with as adults in America. I think that if we had some crucial dialogue about why Christians look at marijuana not like an aspirin or a Tylenol, but more demonized as if it's a higher context or index of or narcotic, which is what was told to us previously before the boom of legalization of marijuana. And if we look at who's benefiting from the legalization of marijuana right now, then it kind of throws a, a a bow and arrow through why marijuana is demonized. But that's just
Okay.
Yeah.
my perspective.
Excellent
Okay.
point, Brother Jackson. If you allow me to dovetail, you actually said the exact thing that's the problem. Consider the taxation of marijuana. Who's going to benefit from it now in the last few years? Currently, there are 28 states where dispensaries are legal for marijuana, but I would encourage anyone to do their own research, but look at the demographic that's the primary owners of those particular dispensaries. So things
Okay.
that I
Good.
knew people growing up when I was younger that are in jail for a very long time for doing the exact same thing, not even on this scale that people are doing legally and are making quite a bit of legal money at this particular point.
Okay. We have a
So,
question that has popped
oh,
up. It says, is it appropriate? And we know the answer for this. It says, is it appropriate for teenagers to smoke marijuana? The answer to that
oh.
is, from my end, is definitely no. Let's hear from our panel. What do you think about teenagers smoking marijuana? Let's hear from Dr. Willis, Andy Jackson, or Roger Gambrell if you're able to tune in with us. What do you think about that?
Sure. I'm not sure if I would recommend it. I would ask for a bit more context for that. Is it just because it's something to do? If it's in the comfort and safety and confines of their house, I'm not sure if the parent would have an issue with alcohol or cigarettes or anything of that nature. So is it
Right.
appropriate? I don't know if I would necessarily recommend that, but it would depend upon the background. What's going on with the kid? Does he have issues with anxiety? Is it used to manage the anxiety that the parents are choosing not to use certain SSRIs or SNRIs? They would much rather use marijuana than some of the other legal aspects that are out there. So I would need a little more context. What's the age? What's the reason for use? Is it just to chill out? Well, I don't know if I would encourage that. But if there are some other things medicinally going on, there are legal ways that a teenager can possibly gain access if there are some health related issues. Would be one thing that came to mind. Of course, like I alluded to earlier, if there are health issues related to cancer, chemotherapy, if you were interested in increasing appetite, again, there are some medications out there with derivatives of marijuana that would definitely be beneficial.
Is
Now,
my volume
and
on yet?
we got you, PG. Come on in,
That
Pastor
Oh,
Gambrell. We
good.
can hear you.
Yeah, yeah. My question is, I've read that marijuana is an hallucinogen. Does
It
it
is.
fall into the category of a hallucinogen? Right.
Correct.
So when we use the word hallucinogen, what does that mean?
Um, The sensories is increased specifically for the visual primarily as well as the hearing. So it's not like say LSD where you're seeing colors and or where you're seeing sounds and hearing colors. Maybe not quite on that particular level, but it will increase the receptors in the brain. There are triggers that will cause hallucinations, absolutely. But again,
Okay.
it would depend
I,
upon the
I
amount of
yeah,
THC contained.
that's what I was gonna say. That I've that's hallucinogen is a strong word to tie into marijuana.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Um,
would reserve that more for LSD or something
yeah,
such as that. There are some properties there, but again, it would depend upon the amount, the type of tolerance that the individual has. If it's someone that's naive and they get something that's pretty strong, quite possibly, but if it's someone like you, and it's like, hey, let me go relax, what you're going to probably do is eat up everything in the pantry and the refrigerator and be pretty relaxed,
and I also
Did I
more
think
hear you?
so than
that
hallucinate.
hallucinate, maybe paranoid a little bit. Maybe the
Okay.
heighten of the senses that the THC does. It may make you overthink some things. That may make you think you heard something, but I don't think that comparing it to a hallucinogen like a mushroom or LSD is fair in
No, no,
this
Okay.
setting, right? Yeah.
Did
no,
I
no,
Okay.
hear
not
the
at
So,
all.
doctor say? Did I hear the doctor say that when you do certain drugs, you see sounds and you hear colors?
Speaking to hallucinogens as such, and I was trying to give a comparison to say
yeah,
LSD or like Deacon Jackson
and
said
I
with the
appreciate that.
mushrooms and such. So
Okay.
when you look at something like that compared to marijuana, that's like looking at Michael Jordan compared to someone on the JV at the local
Yeah,
high school. So I was trying to
Okay.
exactly.
provide some context for that. So when you say hallucinogen, there are some properties there. But if Reverend Thomas, Reverend Gambrell, Deacon Jackson, or someone was to do something, I seriously doubt that they would be hallucinating. Never say never, but I'm looking at the age, the size, the weight, things of that nature. But if you ingested some LSD, well, that's a completely different story. But again, I was trying to
Okay.
provide some context.
Now, I would just want to chime in and say this.
Yes,
So we discussed some of the ways in which marijuana may affect, and we talked about dealing with anxiety. So I want to come
sure,
from a different way. Um, those might be ways in which we may deal with those things, and I would argue there are some medical benefits. My challenge to, especially the people out there that's listening, is that if you say to me, well, I need to do this to feel better, or I need to feel a little bit better, my question is, and this is from a Judeo-Christian point of view, from a Christian, if I'm talking to a believer, now
Hmm.
I got to scope this into a believer. The question is
sure,
going to be is where do we find peace? If you say to me, I'm having anxiety issues, I'm having issues with calming down, the issue may not be medical, the issue may be spiritual and dealing with the soul. And so I think the answers that God gives is that one is the person's relationship with God where it should be. Is there issues of are there issues of sin in a person's life that's causing anxiety? Is there unresolved conflict in a person's life? Because anxiety and things like that are rooted in other areas. I've been trying to answer. My sound wasn't working, and I know there are medical needs for marijuana. I do believe that there are people that may need these things. But
Sure.
my concern is that people say, well, okay, I'm gonna trust in this and look for comfort in this, as opposed to from a Christian point of view, spending time with God, really being close to the Lord, and bringing peace where I'm seeking to smoke, get high, whatever it is, to find those answers. That's a
absolutely.
concern I have. So if somebody can speak to that, that's why I want to kind of throw it out there and
Well,
talk about that.
Well,
I
I'll leave
would
that to
I
the
would
reverends
question.
and the deacons. I'm just speaking to
Well,
the clinical and medicinal
Gotcha,
aspects of some of the
but I
benefits. I'll
think
leave that to
gotcha.
the reverends and the deacons.
that if we look at it from the perspective that you're bringing in, then we would have to decide if anxiety is is a medical issue. I mean, we have a system that will subscribe you oxycodone or other narcotics that are legal in order to combat those anxieties. So when we compare it to using it in a medical term, I honestly think that just the demonization of it and the
Yeah,
illegalization
I
of
agree
it
totally with that.
made us, yeah, it made us not look at it as we could use it as a like somebody that grew up in the inner city and may have seen some trauma growing up in their life, and the system is not set up for that particular person to go to the doctor and say, hey, I had a drive-by shooting and my cousin got killed 10 years ago and I'm still suffering from anxiety behind it. But through that
Yeah,
process, he's learned that, hey, if I hit this joint or if I smoke this blunt, then it kind of helps me through that temporary lapse of or even just a really clinically diagnosed as anxiety that he may have never
yeah,
went to the doctor and say, this is my problem. So I think that because we're talking about it in a medical term,
yeah,
if we just look at the components that is there and the things that it helped it for, regardless of why you taking it, um, I think at this point we should know that it's not as harmful as we portrayed it to be.
yeah. And my,
let,
my
let, let
simple
me let me
response, go ahead,
I would just want
go
to
ahead, go ahead, brother
interject real
Brandon.
quick, right back to you, Pastor Gambriel. We have a teenager that sent in a question. This one, the question was, "What are the side effects of marijuana?" And two, the person came back with, "What do I do about peer pressure to smoke marijuana?" So I want to say to that teenager, um, especially if you're saved, and know ye not, and if you're a teenager at Christian Bible Church, you've heard this before. Know ye not that your body, don't you realize that your body is the temple of God? And I would say to peer pressure, don't do anything that will bring shame upon God's temple. Okay, so you have to understand that peer pressure can be bad in a lot of ways. It can motivate you to do good things, but don't give in to the pressure, especially of doing drugs, because one day marijuana may not be strong enough for you, and then now you're getting peer pressure to move to something stronger. And so don't give in to that. And so I just want to I want to acknowledge, because I recognize the name and of the teenager that came through, and I'm glad that you're on and you're listening. And I hope that you're sharing this information and this dialogue with your peers. But don't give in to the peer pressure, because especially if you're now, if you're not saved, then that's a different question. There's a different answer for that. But just want to touch on that before we got too much further into the dialogue. Pastor Gambriel, come
Yeah,
on, what do you have to share?
I have a verse I want to bring up. If Brother Bouchard can bring up First Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31. Um, verse 23. I'm sorry, First Corinthians 10:23. I don't know if he can bring it up, but I want to read that. I want to read it, and I want to put it on the screen to kind of reference it. I think it's important to bring it up. I'm going to read it, and if he can bring it up, I think I see it coming up right now. But I'm going to read it. But it says, "All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful." He says, all things are lawful, but not all things build up. So let me say it like this. The text says, I'm not under obligation. God doesn't have me in handcuffs telling me to do this or that. I'm free to serve the Lord. But the question is, if I'm involving myself in the usage of marijuana outside of medical purposes, is it good for me? I know very few people that use drugs, and I don't want to. Again, we talked about not demonizing this, but I know very few people that use marijuana personally that doesn't take their life somewhere that they don't want to go. When we talk about how it affects your thinking, I know some people may not affect their thinking, the way they behave. Hopefully, whatever they ingesting that is not laced with something else, because that's another issue that we're talking about too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you may purchase something and thinking it's okay, but it may take your life a different direction. So I want to
Yeah.
kind of bring that in because that's got to be talked about too. Because someone may be giving you something and you trust them, and then it's got something else in it, and it takes you somewhere you don't want to go. Makes you do something you don't want to do. Makes you think what you don't want to think. So when we talk about that's a concern I have because the scripture teaches that people are that God's people are to be sober minded. That we ought to always have our minds in a place where we can think clearly, where we can make good, sound decisions, and we shouldn't ingest things in our bodies that might affect that ability. So I want to kind of just throw that in, just something for us to think about.
Well,
Yeah, but with
I
that,
would
if
like
I
to
may
say
address that,
Yeah, go
okay.
ahead.
If I may address that, but to that particular point, a lot of people do the same thing with everyday legal items, food, for instance,
Yeah.
alcohol, for instance, cigarettes, for instance. Again, I'm not allow me to say this disclaimer in no shape, fashion, or form am I advocating for anyone to do anything illegal, smoke marijuana, whatever the case may be. That's not what I'm doing. However, the goal that I was, the understanding that I had was to speak to the possible medicinal benefits
Hmm.
and detriments of using marijuana. Again, I'll leave the scripture to the reverends as such, but I would encourage all. We see people that are clinically obese, morbidly obese all day, every day. I've seen it quite frequently. I'm a middle aged
Hmm.
man, well into my 40s, born in the 70s, and I've seen so many preachers praying over food that it's obviously not good for you. All of the smothered
Hmm.
pork chops, mashed potatoes with white gravy, chicken fried
I
steak
totally
with
agree.
brown gravy, whatever the case may be, and they will pray until you faint over that food, which can be just as detrimental, if not more so, than some of the things that you mentioned and indicated. So again, I'm not saying do marijuana or not do marijuana. I'm just saying there are legal aspects. Same thing with alcohol. Same thing with cigarettes. There are a number of things out there that will also do the exact same thing. So I know quite frequently we in our community can be so spiritually inclined that we're no worldly good. So we have to kind of find out where people are and meet them there. We can throw scriptures at them all day, every day. However, we're not actually addressing the people where they are and what's going on that may kind of turn some people off to actually seeking help. Again, I'll leave the actual theology to the reverends and such, but I would
And I
encourage
appreciate,
everyone to understand that there are legal aspects that can be just as detrimental, if not more so. And I gave the example about the food, and I'm quite sure, considering our panel and the target audience, we've all seen preachers praying over food and will fall around and have a heart attack, go into the car. So we have to consider
and I
some of those as well.
and hey Doc, I
Yes, sir.
definitely agree with that. And the verse that I mentioned addressed that, which I thought was a great point you made. That at the same time we do speak out, and be wise about usages of different things like marijuana. We also
Yes,
have to
sir.
think about what we eat, what we drink, all of that's involved. I
Absolutely.
appreciate that point. That's a great point because we do need to be balanced in the way we see these things. We just happen to be discussing marijuana today, but we also have to
Sure.
have a balanced view with those other things. So I agree
Oh,
totally with
absolutely.
that. Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
All
so.
right, Andy, you had a comment.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of chime in on when you spoke with the teenager about the peer pressure of marijuana, and the doc kind of brought it home with the food analogy as far as what we are conditioned to believe is good or bad or legal versus illegal. And I think that when you're dealing with a teenager that is growing up in the information age this time, it's kind of hard to say what I was told, that marijuana is a gateway
Hmm.
drug, and believe that the certain elements of the uh, partaking in smoking marijuana was bad. I think that if I could tell a 18-year-old me uh, a conversation about peer pressure and um, dealing with the use of drugs, I would just say, hey, if you know that whatever your peers are doing, they're doing it just to uh, feel excited about something or have um, some social aspects. Don't feel bad about not doing exactly what they're doing.
Right.
Try to be yourself and be a individual in that take, but also look at
Yeah,
the reasoning behind why you have to consider marijuana as a good or a bad thing. And then if you do your research, God will lead you to the right answers to whether or not that's something that you should be doing or not. I just wish that we could get away from the notion that it's a bad thing just because in this country it was made illegal for unforeseen reasons.
Uh,
Hey, look, folks, we got a lot of questions coming in on the chat.
yes, sir.
Pastor Gambriel, this obviously is going to be a subject that we're going to have to bring back and have more crucial dialogue about. I mean, there's some questions coming
yeah, it was a great
that's real
discussion.
intriguing. So, but what we're going to do right now is let's go ahead and let's wrap this being blunt about marijuana. Uh, uh, Dr. Willis, I'm sorry, Dr. Willis.
Yes,
In
sir.
closing, give us your final thoughts about being blunt about marijuana.
It's definitely an individual decision. The information that I would recommend for a teenager will look a lot different for someone that I would recommend in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. So it's kind of a case by case individual, like Deacon Jackson indicated. If it's more about peer pressure to fit in, of course, that's been going on since forever as far as
Hmm.
cigarettes, alcohol, marijuana, different drugs, whatever the case may be. Again, my goal was to speak more to the medicinal benefits and detriments of marijuana, but as far as the actual spiritual aspect of it and things of that nature, I would, of course, defer to the reverends on the panel in regards to the spiritual aspect of that.
All right, Pastor Gambrell.
I want to thank Dr. Willis for coming on, man. This has been a great discussion.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Deacon Jackson, this has been an awesome discussion. I've enjoyed it. Causes me to think. My only concern, I go back to my concern, is really answering what people's issues really are. And I do
Uh huh.
think I
Absolutely.
like what Brother Jackson said that we need to work on getting closer to people, find out what people are, and walking with them through where they are, so we can understand why they're doing what they're doing. We don't want to judge people. We don't want to demonize people because people are doing things for different reasons. And we definitely want to first love people, understand people, walk with people through what they're dealing with. And again, we want to understand this better so we can handle people better. So thank all you guys for this discussion. It's been very helpful for me.
Well,
Absolutely. Was
hey,
there a
this has.
specific question? Was there a specific
Uh,
medicinal or medical question in the chat that I could address before we close? Was there? You said there were a few questions in the chat. I didn't mean to ignore, overlook the chat. I wasn't. I was trying to respond, but I wasn't sure how to.
Most of the questions that are coming up in the chat are dealing with personal preferences and concerns and ideas. There is one before we go that says, "What's the difference between new and old marijuana?" I'm not sure what they mean by that. I don't. But
Yeah, I
what's
had
the
no idea.
difference between new and old
Let me.
marijuana?
I'm gonna
Yeah, I would
try
look
to
for some.
chime in on that. I want
Sure.
to shout out to the person that wrote that question. Is an old friend of mine from class. But
Okay.
I don't think that is a difference between old and new marijuana. I think that there's a difference in the technology that we have today to develop the crop as far as marijuana, and back in the day you relied on just God and his ability to grow the marijuana, and now you have more facilities that are able to kind of enhance the um, levels of THC in certain plants that
Gotcha.
um, kind of give you a different feel than it was back in the day. But just to kind of wrap it up on my end, I just wanted to say, as far as crucial dialogue, I think that if we dig a little deeper into the pharmaceutical companies that depend on, us not being as healthy, and when being Christians to have a conversation about a plant that God created, I think that we should dive a little bit deeper into the system that created the demonization of marijuana than the actual effects that it has on people today. So appreciate y'all
So
having
it,
me on. Next time.
so it sounds like we need to have a crucial dialogue about being blunt about marijuana from a spiritual slash godly perspective. That's what it sounds like we're headed to. But anyway, hey guys, thanks for tuning in with us tonight. Pastor Gambrell, Dr. Charles Willis, Andy Jackson. This has been a great dialogue. Hey folks, if you have questions about us, you want to know what we're all about, you can find us on the World Wide Web at powerhouseoflove.org. Love to hear from you. Love to hear your comments. This concludes today's crucial dialogue, being blunt about marijuana. We'll see you all next time.
This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Make sure you never miss a show by joining us on Mondays at 6 p.m. by going to our website, powerhouseoflove.org, our YouTube and Facebook channel, or the Google and Apple podcasts. Hope you tune in next time.